Hey everybody, it's Ross and another evening of vlogging. This time I am not going to talk about myself, to I'm sure everyone's great pleasure. Yeah, I wanted to talk about a video I saw yesterday. It's by a person named Aura Puffs, and it's them playing both Mega Man X and Mega Man X2 at the same time, using the same input controls, and managing to beat both of them in 3 hours that I have not watched the entirety of, beat them simultaneously. And this got me thinking about different ways that we play games other than how the developers intended. So for example, in the simultaneous Mega Man playing, long, flat places full of enemies to shoot, you can jump and shoot pretty well and get through both ways. But if there's ever a tricky part, whether it's a boss battle or a tricky platforming segment or just a lot of bad guys, you start to see the level in a different way, where you see spaces that perhaps one Mega Man can be kind of put into a corner and not be in any danger while the other one does something tricky, and then the other one waits while the other one catches up. And you kind of have to play this tag teaming game. And you have to, if you're going by the constraints of what this person put forward as the end goal of beating it at the same time, then you have to keep in somewhat sync as you go along. It's also interesting how conversations or cinematics in between levels and such are a time of frantic playing on one or the other, when no controls really matter on one side because you're just reading text, you're watching something unfold, while on the other one, they're trying to get as much ground as they can before the other Mega Man is suddenly affected by it and could potentially, fall off a cliff or get hurt. So anyway, like I said, this video got me thinking about the different ways that some people choose to play games that are different from how the developers intended. I think it's kind of a natural tendency that any kind of normal activity that becomes kind of routine or mundane, which can even be beating a really difficult game, can be made more interesting when you start creating new rules for it, or you start adding additional challenges. And I think that's a very common thing that exists in the modding community for video games, as well as in some developers' minds. So for example, with Valve, who made Left 4 Dead 2, a little bit into the release of that game, they started creating weekly modifications called mutations. And they encouraged people to play the game in very, very different ways, because they would change how the levels that these people have been playing for over a year were seen. So just a couple of them. One was Last Man on Earth, which was when you played by yourself, and there weren't any regular zombies. There were just the special, really dangerous, special mutation monsters. And you would start to see the level in a different way, where you would, for one thing, probably go really fast. For another, you'd probably be very suspicious of outdoor spaces with roofs, because those are where hunters can jump down on you or smokers can grab you. No place is truly safe, but you start to see it in a different way. Another one is Chainsaw Massacre, where everyone has a chainsaw, and you have unlimited gas or whatever for it. And that becomes a challenge in closed-in spaces, because you can hurt other people with your chainsaw, right? So you would start to avoid those really narrow spaces and start taking a different path if that were an option, or getting through those areas very quickly. You would not enjoy being in those spots. And then a third one is Room for One, which I don't know if I ever played this one. This one sounds fantastic, but essentially, when you go through a full campaign in Left 4 Dead or Left 4 Dead 2, you try to help everybody get onto the vehicle that takes you away, and hopefully you survive. In this case, only one of the 4 normally cooperative players gets to survive. So then it becomes a very interesting game of, when you're playing this final level, at what point do you start going I think I can make this on my own, and I'm going to attack my teammates? At what point do you think oh, okay, well, when we get through this door, or when we get past this horde of zombies, that's when I'm going to do it. When we get up this ladder, that's when I'm going to do it. And I think that totally changes how you think of, if not the level, the progression of how players come to understand the final level, in terms of there's this many waves and so on. One other example I can think of is Fallout New Vegas, which is this post-apocalyptic game. There's a hardcore mode, where you suddenly have to care about things like drinking water and eating regularly. You have to care about sleeping. You have to care about when you get injured, it's not very easy to get healed. It takes time. When you get irradiated, yes, it's called fallout, it takes time for the medicine that cures you to take effect. And that can totally change how you approach levels where normally you just barge in the door and just go guns blazing, because you know you can use these things that will heal you instantly. In this case, you have to say, like, well, I'll rest up tonight and I'll try it in the morning and maybe it'll take me 2 days. Like, that's such a different way of playing the game, and it's a very different way of even seeing the entire map in terms of where you can get to in one day and what you have to be aware of carrying with you as you go, which I just think is so fascinating. Oh, I got one more. Pokemon. So there are certain matches in the more recent Pokemon games where they will reverse the type matchups, right? So in Pokemon, fire beats grass, grass beats water, and water beats fire, for example. There's a whole lot of other types, so just those, for example. In these matches, all of those are flipped, right? So that doesn't change, for like we've been talking about the map or the layout of, where you're going. But for people who play Pokemon a lot, the, graph, you might say, of what beats what is super effective against what is not very effective against what, that graph you can think of as a kind of landscape or a map, and to think of all of those flipped, every little thing is flipped in the opposite direction, that is a kind of changing of the landscape of how you imagine the game space. And every single Pokemon choice you make, you have to think, well, my traditional understanding of the elements has to be reversed. So I also think that was very interesting. Expanding out from games, we also see this in children, where they can see a space in a new way and create a game out of it, practically spontaneously. So, for example, like the floor is lava, right? That changes a boring living room that people are in all the time into suddenly this place full of islands and danger and obstacles to get around. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who, if I got bored walking around some mall or place with tiles on the floor, I would start walking in special patterns based on the squares or the hexagons or whatever, or different colors, just because I'm bored walking around looking at clothes I wasn't caring to buy. So anyway, Aura Puff's video just got me thinking about the different ways that Aura Puff's video, I think, shows the natural human tendency for us to take things that are presented to us and create new things out of it, create new experiences once we've kind of exhausted that initial playthrough or enjoyment out of something. So I'm curious if other people have other examples. I mean, I know there's tons. There's a whole Tumblr that I think is really neat called No Wrong Way to Play that highlights different ways that people play games that you wouldn't expect, which I would recommend checking out. But yeah, please let me know if you think of anything else that's interesting. And I don't know, I find this to be a really interesting topic. So I guess I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.